In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a drain and fill on the automatic transmission fluid for a 23 Macan base model with 39,000 miles on it. It'll be the first time that I've replaced the transmission fluid on this car, and so I want to be able to just demonstrate that, how I do that. Hopefully that'll be helpful to somebody. So I've got with me some tools. I've got 6 quarts of the transmission fluid. I've got a T25 Torx bit for taking off the underbody panel, some plastic pin removal tools to get those 2 pins out for the underbody panel. And then I got a transfer fluid pump, which I'll suck the fluid out of here and get it back into the car. A new filter for the external filter and a new O-ring for that filter's housing canister, and of course a clean catch pan and some wipes for cleaning stuff up as I go. But most importantly, I've got the instructions. I got these instructions from ecarguides.com. I don't have any affiliation to those dudes, but they've got a lot of procedure steps for Porsches, which are you can't just get a book easily for that stuff. So I appreciate those guys. But I've got eCarGuide's instructions here. There's just 9 basic steps. Really, it's just drain the fluid out. While that's draining out, you swap out your filter. Then you put your drain plug back in, refill the transmission with the fluid that you need. And then it's a matter of going through the gears, making sure the temperature's just right when you set your final level of the fluid. We'll go through all those steps, or I'll show all of that. But so that's basically what's going to happen. If you're curious about this fluid, I did decide, since I'm still under factory warranty and I like good parts, I went ahead and got the Porsche brand fluid. Obviously, Porsche doesn't make their own fluid. Somebody else makes it. So I could have just got that at probably half the price. But I went with the Porsche stuff. The PDK fluid on Pelican's website was $47.79. No, excuse me, $44.50 a liter, so $44.50. At the dealership, their cost was $53.62. But I'm really thankful our dealer has a discount for Porsche club members, PCA members. If you're not a PCA member, I would recommend it. If you get a dealer that'll give you a discount, it makes that $40-50 membership disappear in a heartbeat. Plus, it's a great organization. You meet with people, go drive, and cool stuff. But I only paid $45.58 per liter for this stuff from my dealer, since he gave me that great discount. So just shy with tax, just shy of $300 to buy 6 quarts of fluid. So I actually don't think it's going to take all 6. I experienced that with the 911 when I changed its PDK fluid. It didn't take all what was required from eCarGuides as well. So I got a 1.5 liters sitting in the cabinet that's probably $50 worth of fluid I'll never need. Not anytime soon anyway. So stay tuned to the video, because I'm going to let you know how many liters you really need, and maybe that'll save you a little money. But let's get into swapping out the fluid on this car. All right, so I'm counting 15 T25 fasteners that I need to remove. So when you want to remove these pins, the plastic pins that are here, there's another one over here. Little tip is that when you're trying to pry the top out, right, so you're trying to expand it, it'll be pushed together, and you got to pop this top part out, and then so that this can come down, right? When you get your pry tool, whether you're using one of these kinds, which I recommend, or maybe something that's plastic, which didn't work as good, be sure you're getting in underneath the top of this head here and not back here, because when they're sandwiched together, it's kind of one piece. But obviously, if you're pulling back here, then you're trying to pull the whole thing down while this is still compressed in there and it didn't come out. So you got to get just this head. So look for that. Be sure you're separating in between there and prying that down. And this tool was really great because I was able to kind of work it. Hopefully you can see on this side, it's real easy to get underneath the whole thing and then it doesn't want to pop out. So you got to get just underneath that top head and go slow with it because it's just thin little plastic and you'll break the top flange off if you get too aggressive with it. So just kind of rotating side to side here, trying to walk it out evenly. There it goes. All right. And then it comes right out. Easy peasy. Now I'll get the other fasteners here and this will fall on my head. All right, so now we're going to break loose the fill bolt. It's right there. You see that? It's got a 10 millimeter hex, like an Allen deal there, right? So, and then we'll break that loose just to be sure we can get fluid in there, right? We don't want to drain the fluid out and then find out we can't put fluid back in. So that's just a precautionary step. I've actually broken it loose, so there's no concern there. But this is the filter, external filter, and it's this end here. This is front of the car is that way. This is on the driver's side of the transmission. This is a 17 millimeter end on there. You can put a ratchet on there to take that off, and we'll get that off and get the filter out while we're draining the fluid from here. Also 10 millimeter hex. 10 millimeter hex to break this loose. Now I'm gonna loosen the drain. I got it clean, relatively clean. I want to know if there's any weird stuff comes out of the transmission, so I don't want any dirt in there before I start. Also, I'm going to measure my fluid just so I have a, an understanding of how much was, how much came out, right, for putting it back in. And as you might be able to see, well, yeah, you can sort of see. Let's get in there. That's nice and clean. I'm happy to see that. Maybe I ought to loosen that fill a little better. Let that flow. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, so we're gonna let that drain out, and then the filter's right there. Get that lid off, new filter and gasket on there. I'm gonna let this drain for probably a half hour or so. With my drain pan under the filter and a 17 millimeter socket on my ratchet, I'm going right up here. And I'm gonna take this filter housing off while a little bit of that transmission continues to drain. I'm only a little more than 5 minutes into the drain process. I was going to try to give it a half hour just for good measure. I took a sample of the transmission fluid, even though it's nice and clean looking. I did take a sample if I want to send it off to Blackstone for an analysis. So there's a filter exposed. Give a little tug and it comes out. The new filter, there's a gasket or an O-ring on this end of the filter, and the new filter comes with a gasket there. So you don't need to buy one of those separate. but you will want to have a new gasket for the housing. See, there's an O-ring here, and you'll want a new one of those. That's the part number for the O-ring for the filter housing. I'll put this stuff in the description of the video too, okay? And here's the part number for the filter that I purchased. It's that PAC 325 330-OEM. That's a Pelican parts number, but take off the OEM and it should be the actual Porsche number as well. So this is a genuine Porsche filter. But that little O-ring is on there. Came with it. So it's just a matter of sliding it in. I'll use a little hook tool like this to take the old O-ring off of the housing. See that? And I'll put the new one on. All right. And then if I there's a little bit of drippy fluid, you know, it's just residual hanging on. I'm going to use that to lubricate my brand new O-ring. And so now that's on and got a little lube on there. Then I'm going to screw this back in now. Okay, so the spec on this is hand tight or 8 foot-pounds, which would be 96 inch-pounds. So I'm using my little baby inch-pound torque wrench, which I don't get to use very often. So that's kind of cool. There it is. So there is a little catch on the housing, like it's a little U-shaped notch, and then there's a little tab on the outer part of the deal there, and so I can see that I've kind of gotten into that notch there, so that way it would keep that filter from coming off. So if you just did it hand tight and paid attention to those notches, you'd be fine. Okay, that's finger tight. My 10 millimeter hex torque wrench set to 33 foot-pounds. Oh man, that feels like a lot. There it is. That plug going into a sheet metal little thing, that felt like a lot of torque, but that's 33 foot-pounds. That's why it's good to use a torque wrench, right? I mean, rather than guess at it, I just like knowing. Okay, I'll get a little brake clean and I'll clean down all this fluid off of things so that I know that it's nice and clean. That way, if I ever see any oil around here in the future, I'll know it's not residual from changing, that it's maybe a result of a leak or something. So I always like that clean real good. I'll do that. So if you were wondering how much fluid is going to come out of there, you can see I've transferred it to this jug. That's what 5 quarts would have been. And you see I'm just slightly above that. So looks like it's going to take 5 quarts to put back into this transmission and get it at correct level. All right, so you can see the fill port there. I've got my fluid pump in my first liter of fluid. Okay, push that in there and it kind of stops. Hopefully that don't jump out on me as I pump here. One of these cheapy little pumps for just like transmission fluid, but I still flush it every time with the new fluid, you know, into the drain pan. so that I can make sure that there's no old fluid or anything. Of course, I drain it out beforehand. But anyway, so the instructions say 4 liters of fluid should go in, and then it'll start dripping out. We saw that I took 5 liters out, so I'm expecting to put that much back in. But I guess only about 4 can go in before it starts dripping out. Then I'll need to get into the car and with it in park and the foot on the brake, I'll need to pump in, you go through, put it in park, reverse, neutral, drive for a second kind of thing. Not driving anywhere, just go through the gears on that with the brake on, cycle the transmissions so that way the valve body picks up fluid, doing all of that with the car running. And then I should be able to put in some more fluid. I should be able to get the next liter in. And when you're doing that, at that point, when the fluid starts to run out the fill hole, then you're full. You're supposed to stop and let it dribble out until it's even with the bottom of the fill hole. Then you can put your fill plug back in place and torque it to 33 foot-pounds, just like you did the drain pan. So we should probably only need 5 liters of this stuff, not the 6 that I bought. What I'm about ready to do now is start the car, cycle through the gears, but I'm going to want to measure or monitor the transmission temperature. You don't want to get more than about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You want to warm it up so that it's at that temperature, so that way, because the fluid will expand and it gets a more accurate measure in there than just being cold, and that's important. Plus you want to cycle through the gears so you can get the valve body all fluid fill and all that kind of stuff. But to measure the temperature while you're in progress, I'm going to use my Autel scan tool, and I'll be able to go into the transmission control module, I believe it is, and see the temperature of the transmission as I'm doing this. So I put the fill plug back in the car. Ideally, if you had 2 people, one could be under there while the one guy gets in here, starts it, does that stuff. The other guy could be underneath the car pumping the fluid in while it's running. It sounds like that's what the procedure wants. I'm by myself, so I went ahead, as I got the amount of fluid in and it started pouring out pretty steady, I went ahead and put the fill plug back on so it wouldn't be leaking out fluid. And now I'll do this step. All right, so with my scan tool plugged into the data port down there, the diagnostic port, go ahead and select Porsche, and I can do standalone diagnostics, and I can let it read the VIN number of the car. I'll hit the read button. It's reading, it's come back with my VIN number. I'll select OK, and it confirms that this is a Macan 2023, and I'll say yes. And then I go into diagnosis, and then I can tell it control unit and PDK transmission electronics. Right, the key is on right now, but the engine's not running, obviously. And then I'll tell it I want to see live data, and I'll tell it temperature. Okay, and so now I'm looking at some data here, and I believe I'm going to want to use this transmission oil temperature for the internal sensor. Right, T003. I'm seeing the temperature moved to 91.4. I'm going to go ahead and step on the brake and put the car into reverse. And of course, it's balking at me because it wants me to close the door. Neutral. It might actually not shift since it's, I think it is shifting. And I'm just going from park to reverse to neutral, now to drive, back to neutral, reverse. My temperature is now up to 95, it says. Back into park. So I've gone through a couple of times now. I'm back into park. I'm at 96.8. And I'm gonna go see whether I can put any more transmission fluid in. So I'm in park. Park and brake is on. I'm at 104 temperature. Started to drip out. I got most of that in there. I probably have all I need. All right, so to be sure on the fill process, I want to be sure that I make that clear. What you do is you add your transmission fluid at about 4.5 liters when the engine is cold. You've drained it, you've put your drain plug back in, and then you start putting the fluid in. And then at right about 4.5 liters, something like that, it's going to begin to pour out. So stop there, put the fill plug on. Now you need to get in the car, start the car, go through each one of the gears, stopping at each gear for 5 seconds or so that you're actuating the valve body, right? Park, reverse, neutral, drive, go down, then go back to park, and then from park back to drive, slowly stopping at each gear. Do that a couple of times to take up the fluid. And then put the car back in park, leave it running, and with the car running, you get back underneath it and take the fill plug off and begin adding more fluid. You'll be able to add more fluid at that point. And keep adding fluid until it begins to run out. Like, don't go crazy fast, but gently add fluid in there. But yes, you do have to kind of work fast enough because remember the temperature is rising and you want to stop at 104. And so add more fluid in there until it begins to run out again, that second time. And then with the car running, and then go ahead and put the fill plug back on. And at this point, you're probably at 104 degrees. You're checking that with your scan tool. So that's the process. I kind of felt like since I measured it and I was pretty spot on with what came out on going back in, I wasn't super comfortable letting it all drain out again, or as much as what wanted to. So I might be a slightly overfilled, but not much because I measured what came out and what I put in. So there's the process of that. And maybe it was a little bit confusing as I was working there. So anyway, that's the process. And then you can button everything back up, right? Once you're for sure you're done, torque the fill port to 33 foot-pounds, put your underbody cover back on, and get that same, basically opposite of the way you took it off. That's easy enough. And then you're all squared away for another 40,000 miles. That fluid looked pretty clean that was coming out of there. And so I feel like it's probably that 40,000 interval is probably a good recommendation. Often I'll do half of what Porsche recommends. They have a different agenda, for environmental standards and other kind of stuff, right? They want kind of like 10,000 mile oil changes and longer intervals for some of their own reasons, which aren't necessarily so that your car lasts forever. And I could like it to last as long as possible, so I prefer to do a little bit more maintenance. But I think that 40,000 mile interval is probably about right. So there's that. Leave me any comments. I'll be happy to answer them. I'm a pretty small channel, so I'm able to do that. Give me a thumbs up if this was useful or you think it'd be useful for somebody else. That's how people see the channel, is by getting comments and thumbs up stuff. So the whole point of the channel is just to be helpful. That's just it. And so if you think it's going to be helpful, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate that. And any comments, I'll be happy to answer. Or tell me what I did wrong, and I'm good with that too. We can all learn if there's something I got wrong. But anyway, thanks for watching.